This video lecture is about declaring independence and moving towards a new form of American government. So first of all, we've talked a lot at this point about the Revolutionary War, about kind of the movement for independence, but the reason why the delegates at the Second Continental Congress finally decide to actually declare independence has a lot to do with the war effort. The Continental Congress is looking for ways to support Washington in the war effort. That means maybe boosting morale. It also means trying to secure some help from foreign powers, which, as you know, we eventually are able to do after Saratoga. The way it works is this. In June, a representative from Virginia, Richard Henry Lee, brings a resolution before the Continental Congress for independence, and then voting and editing and debate ensue. Congress appoints a committee to compose a statement of the American goals. It's made up of 5 members: John Adams from Massachusetts, Roger Sherman from Connecticut, Robert Livingston from New York, Benjamin Franklin from Pennsylvania, and Thomas Jefferson from Virginia. This committee doesn't keep very good notes on how they actually did this, so it's kind of unknown how exactly who contributed what, but it is known that Jefferson is the one who ultimately ended up writing the full declaration. We've already talked a little bit about what Jefferson's influences are. This is, of course, Thomas Paine, our friend who wrote Common Sense. Thomas Paine was a major influence on Jefferson. The pamphlet, Common Sense, had come out a few months before the Resolution for Independence, so this was fresh in people's minds. Jefferson is also very influenced by the ideas of John Locke, who we've also talked about in class, particularly the ideas of natural rights. Jefferson himself combines all of these, and he is an accomplished writer and statesman as well at this point, and gives his own sort of flavor to the Declaration of Independence. So what's in it? Declaration of Independence has 4 main parts. First part is the preamble, which starts when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for the bonds of one people to dissolve the bonds that have connected them to another, blah, blah, blah. Essentially, it's the reasoning. Here's what this letter is going to be about, and the Declaration of Independence is kind of a breakup letter between the American colonies and King George. So, dear King George, it's over. Then there's a Declaration of Rights. These are the things that the Americans feel like they're entitled to, chiefly independence. And then comes kind of the nasty part. There's a long list of specific grievances against the king, almost all of which start with the clause "he has." So he has passed laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records. It goes on and on. There's 27 specific grievances that the colonists have against the king. And then it ends in a resolution, resolved that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, and then it is signed by the delegates. Let's listen to some famous people read it, shall we?
When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them.
A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
This is all preamble. Let's skip ahead to the grievances. Here's some grievances.
Armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution.
All right, you get the idea. So all this stuff is in the Declaration, but what's not in the Declaration of Independence, first of all, there are no mentions at all of slavery or women's rights, and this is something that continues on to the Constitution. These two groups are made no reference to, or very oblique reference to, in that document either. First of all, this wasn't entirely the plan. Jefferson had written an original paragraph for the Declaration of Independence where one of the grievances against the king was that he had imposed the slave trade onto the colonies, and that paragraph was taken out of the final version of the Declaration. Nowhere, though, did he write anything about women. Despite the urging of people like Abigail Adams, the wife of John Adams, one of the members of the committee and delegate to the Second Continental Congress, who had even written things to her husband specifically at this time. There's a letter from her saying, imploring her husband to remember the ladies. in this time of giving power to people, to not let power remain in the hands of their husbands. She said, remember, given the opportunity, all men would be tyrants. But unfortunately, their ideas do not get reflected. What is in the Declaration, John Adams mentioned, there's not an idea in it that what had been hackneyed in Congress for 2 years before. So all of what is in the Declaration is something that the Congress had been working on or thinking about or saying for at least 2 years beforehand. So for the delegates, it wasn't very revolutionary, although for the rest of the world, it certainly was. So it's finally signed by all states on July 4th and becomes sort of the statement to the world that the United Colonies in North America are now in fact their own country. We will never be royals. Royals. So now we have a country. Great. We need a government. About a year after the Declaration, or a little bit less than a year after the Declaration is adopted, we write a system of government, which of course is around to this day. We all know it. It's called the Articles of Confederation. Oh wait, that changes at some point. So it only lasts for about a year or so, the Articles of Confederation. It's adopted in 1777, and it's a system of government that very much reflected the founders' concerns, some of the same grievances that they had set out against the king in the Declaration of Independence. There's no executive in the Articles of Confederation because there was a fear that any executive power, any person with that authority in the colonies, could eventually become a king. There are very limited powers of taxation, which makes sense when you think about all of the strife and rebellion and unrest and tension that have been created in the colonies as a result of British tax acts after the French and Indian War trying to raise that revenue. The founders did not want a repeat of that experience and didn't want to start a cycle of rebellions against taxation that would never stop. It was a very real fear. Finally, one of the things that the Articles of Confederation required was that if anything was going to be changed in the Articles, or any policies that had to do with the raising of money, 9 of the 13 states had to agree. So it's much more than a 2/3 majority, and more than a simple majority as well. That ensured that the power would remain with the states rather than with a strong national government. So there may be some problems with this form of government, this Articles of Confederation, and that's what we're going to talk about in class tomorrow.